All right, let's talk about something you see in headlines all the time but might feel a little fuzzy on: GDP and GNP. We're going to crack the code on these two economic heavyweights and really get to the story behind the numbers. Okay, let's dive right in.
Yay, you see these letters, GDP, GNP, plastered all over the news whenever people talk about the economy. But what are they actually saying? Honestly, it can feel like you need an economics degree just to keep up. So today, we're going to cut right through all that noise.
So what is the big deal here? GDP versus GNP. They sound so similar, right? But that one little letter in the middle, that D versus that N, it tells a completely different story about how a country is doing.
And hey, if you've ever gotten them mixed up, don't sweat it. You are definitely in good company. It's a super common point of confusion, but by the end of this, we're going to have it cleared up for good.
Okay, here's the absolute simplest way to lock this in your brain forever. Just think, borders versus citizens. Seriously, that's it. This one core idea is the key to understanding everything that follows. All right, let's tackle GDP first. Gross domestic product. The magic word here is domestic. This number measures the value of absolutely everything produced inside a country's physical borders. It doesn't matter who owns the factory or the company. If it's made in that country, it counts for GDP. Think of it as the economic pulse of a place.
And then we have GNP, or Gross National Product. The keyword here, national. This measures all the stuff produced by a country's citizens and their companies, no matter where on earth they're doing it. So this is the economic pulse of a people.
Let's make this super concrete with an example. Picture a factory in Manchester, in the UK, but it's owned by an American company. Well, everything that factory makes adds to the UK's GDP. Why? Because it's happening in the UK. But that very same production also counts towards the US's GNP because it's owned by Americans. See the difference? Location versus ownership. That's the whole game.
So why does this even matter? Well, this isn't just some boring textbook definition. The difference between these two numbers tells a really fascinating story about where a country actually stands in the global economy.
You know, when you compare a country's GDP to its GNP, you get a snapshot of the flow of money. Is more money flowing into the country from foreign companies setting up shop, or is more money flowing back to its citizens from their investments all over the world? The numbers really paint a picture of these global money trails.
And here's where it gets really interesting. In a lot of developing nations, you'll often see that the GDP is higher than the GNP. So what's going on there? Well, it usually means there's a ton of foreign investment, multinational companies building factories, for example. That activity boosts the local GDP, which is great. But the profits from those factories? They're often sent back to the company's home country, so they don't actually get counted in the developing nation's GNP.
Now let's zoom out a bit, because that gap, the difference between what's made in a country and what its people actually earn, has huge implications for national wealth. It pretty much determines whether a country as a whole is a borrower or a lender on the world stage.
And this leads us right to another one of those fancy-sounding terms, the current account balance. It sounds complicated, but it's directly tied to those international money flows we were just talking about. Just think of it like a country's national checkbook with the rest of the world. And here's the kicker. If a country is running a current account deficit, it means it's spending more than it's earning on the world stage. It's buying more from other countries than it's selling to them. And to cover that gap, it has to borrow money, which means its foreign debt goes up. And if you want a perfect real-world example of this, just look at the U.S. For decades now, the U.S. has consistently run a current account deficit. Year after year, it's been spending more abroad than it earns from abroad. And to finance that lifestyle, it's had to borrow from the rest of the world. Over a long period, that has completely flipped the script, taking the U.S. from being the world's biggest creditor to its biggest debtor.
Okay, deep breath. We've nailed GDP and GNP, but I know what you're probably thinking. What about all those other acronyms flying around? Let's just quickly clear up the rest of this economic alphabet soup so you feel totally on top of it.
Think of this as your quick and dirty cheat sheet. GNI, gross national income, is almost the same as GNP. It just tweaks it a bit for things like foreign aid. And anytime you see an N at the beginning, like NDP or NNP, it just means net. They've taken the gross number and subtracted the value of stuff that wore out over the year, like old machinery. Simple as that. Oh, and one last thing here. If you've ever found yourself Googling GPD and getting confused, don't worry. It turns out it's just one of the most common typos for GDP. So now you're in on the secret. So after all of that, what's the big takeaway? Which numbers should you actually be paying attention to if you want to know how an economy is really doing?
It really comes down to this. GDP is your best snapshot for the level of economic activity happening inside a country's borders. It's a measure of internal strength, but GNP? That gives you a much better picture of the actual income that a country's people are earning. They're just telling two different but equally important stories.
And that really leaves us with a big question to chew on, especially in the world we live in today. Which number tells the more important story? Is it the raw power of what's being produced at home? Or is it the total income a nation's people are earning, no matter where on the planet they earn it? It's a question that gets right to the heart of what we even want our economies to do in the first place. Thanks for joining me.